Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Comix Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of August. This is the Kids Club, and our book this month is really funny and really, really funny. Everybody who works here at the store, all the adults loved it, and it's also, it's a great kids book, but we all, so funny. The Dire Days of Willowweep Manor. SHAENON K is right here next to me, my first in-person guest in 19 months, which is weird and strange.
That's right.
And then on the live stream we have Christopher Baldwin, which there he is.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris. How are you? And he's muted. And you're unmuted now. Nope.
Nope.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, you're good. Perfect.
Oh, good. Hello. Yes, I'm great. Hi.
Hi. Welcome to our clown show. Yeah, like I said, with having someone in studio, it's a little different than doing the live stream. We're getting used to it again. It's rough. Like I said, we loved the book and
good.
Thought it was terrific. Yeah, very proud and happy to have it. Let's start where we're supposed to start. And the first question always is, why comics? Of all the things that you could be doing in the world, right? Why comics? What is it about comics that speaks to you, that makes your heart sing, that fills you full of joy, that gets you going?
It's just very exciting. It's a medium that's a lot of fun to work in. It's kind of like making movies, but you can do it solo or with one other person, as with Willowweep Manor. There's a combination of drawing and writing, but also that particular frisson of combining those two things to like tell a story visually. I just got really interested in that. I mean, I hope everybody grows up reading comics, but I kind of got into comics and graphic novels seriously in college, and I was drawing comic strips and also just reading a lot of graphic novels. And that was when I kind of got interested in like the particular storytelling possibilities of comics as opposed to like any other medium. And I just kind of got stuck on that, and now I'm doomed.
Yeah. I want to talk more in depth about like those particular things about comics. But let's get Christopher's answer to the base question. Why comics?
Well, I started doing comics before like kindergarten. Both my parents worked in a tofu factory, and I was doing comics about how tofu was invented to torture children. And and I always loved writing stories, and I always loved drawing. And I did like 20 or 30 comics before I finished high school. But it wasn't until college that I was like, oh, maybe I could actually do this as like a profession. And it never stopped from there.
Yeah. So how old were you when you started doing them? You said 7 or 8 or something?
It was either kindergarten or right before starting kindergarten. Okay. So what's that, 5 or so?
Okay.
My first comic book was 6th grade, so I would have been around 10. But before that, it was just like 3-panel things.
Yeah. And what was that first comic book?
Oh, Super Squirrel.
Nice.
The amazing squirrel, and Lex Puchar, the dog. He was his arch nemesis. It was very original.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good though. Did you? How many pages was that? Just out of curiosity.
Oh God, it was so long ago. I don't know, 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty good for
book.
That's pretty good for 6th grade.
Yeah.
Okay.
Together.
Okay. And you, when did you first do your first comics?
I drew comic strips first. Actually, I've mostly done comic strips, and I drew my own artwork. And I made books when I was a kid. I'd staple paper together and make books. I started making comic strips probably in high school. I had a comic strip that ran in like the kids section of the Cleveland Plain Dealer of the newspaper. Yeah. So, because I was supposed to be like writing articles for this kids paper that the Cleveland Plain Dealer put out, and I did not like journalism. It was very scary because I had to go talk to people and like look at them in the face, which is horrifying. So I said, could I like do a comic instead? And I just started drawing a comic strip.
Yeah.
And then I just did a comic strip in college, and then like at the end of college, like web comics were just started becoming a thing. So I was like, wait, I could just keep doing this for no particular reason and just do it indefinitely. And that's what I did.
And how old were you when you started doing the first?
I was in high school when I started doing comic strips, but I mean, I did
Okay.
comic strips before that. I would do books and cartoons and things. That was the first time I started doing a comic strip regularly.
Yeah, but doing it regularly is different than
Yeah.
just sort of doing it for fun on your own.
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause you have a deadline, and you can't miss that deadline.
Exactly, and that strip was about some kids who like hung out at a convenience store at night, and a space alien would visit like in the middle of the night when they were doing the night shift.
Cool, awesome. Yeah. That sounds fun.
It was fun.
Yeah, yeah. Did you get any formal training in art or comics?
No, I have like no art training. All my background is in writing. I majored in English in college, and I took art in high school and stuff, but other than that, I just kind of made it up as I went along.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually.
It's cool. I've run into problems now because there are points where now I want to be able to use particular tools and techniques that I don't really know how to do because I don't have any kind of formal training. I can like draw. I can draw cartoons, okay, but I can't really paint at all or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you draw cartoons just great.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. You're very kind.
Christopher, did you have formal training in art?
Yeah, I did 2 years as a art major at UMass Amherst. Before I left, but mostly I just took drawing classes, like live drawing classes, so I can draw from life and oil paint from life pretty photorealistically.
Oh, nice.
So. But yeah,
actually, I find that interesting because your art style is so cartoony.
Yeah, well, there's two kinds of sort of the artwork. There's one where you're drawing from life, and so the information passes through you, and you try not to get in the way at all because you want exactly the light you see to get to your hand.
Yeah.
And then there's cartooning, which is sort of a language where beforehand you have to decide like, eyes are going to look like this in this universe. Noses are going to look like this, and so it's like an entirely different skill set. The two don't overlap very much for me at all, really.
Yeah, well, that's why it's pretty rare to hear about it in anybody really because they are different skill sets. I think one is more well, as you said, letting it pass through you, and the other is representing something.
Yeah. I mean, I think they definitely. I mean, having the realistic skill definitely has complemented my ability to see and feel what I'm drawing. But very unrelated.
Yeah. And when you did your art major, it was just for general drawing, not for comic specific, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, there weren't any comics programs. I mean, this was 92, 93, 94, around then. I don't know if there were really any in the country. I mean, there probably were one or two, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Kubert School's been around since the 70s, I want to say, and yeah, there's the Cartoon Center in Vermont. Was around that point.
Yeah,
probably.
But most colleges didn't have particular unless they were particular about comics and had programs.
Yeah, no, true. No, that's what I mean. The specific programs at a specific school, but not a general.
I didn't know they started that early. That's amazing.
Yeah. What was I going to ask here? So what was the genesis of this book?
Ooh, that was initially Chris's idea. So Chris, what was the genesis of the book?
I liked Jane Eyre, and so I was like, oh, what if this woman falls off a bridge and wakes up kind of in a Jane Eyre kind of universe, and I have no idea why, and wouldn't that be funny? And that was kind of it. And I started writing it a little bit, not much at all, and I realized that I just didn't have the memory or the skill really to get all the tropes of the genre. And I've been talking with Shannon for about a decade, asking her like we should collaborate, and she said yes. And so we'd been waiting for the right project, and I was like, oh, this would be perfect. I mean, I think she's one of the funniest web comics out there. And,
thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Were you a fan of Gothic romances, or was it just that you like Jane Eyre you saw a particular adaptation of it or something?
No, definitely the books. I mean, I've only read a smattering. Admittedly, I think Jane Eyre is probably, one of, if not the pinnacle of that period. But yeah, no, I love, I like older literature. I like a lot of Dickens, just stuff like that. And so it really appealed to me. The characters are great. Really strong women you don't really see that a lot of times. In literature, obviously in real life you see it all the time.
I know what you mean. Are you a fan of the genre? Clearly, you must be.
Like, I actually not as I had read those books, but like I kind of got more into it when I was researching for Willowweep Manor. So I had read like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre and stuff. But I got into reading some of the older like Gothic pot boilers and stuff like The Monk and The Castle of Otranto, which are just bonkers books.
Okay.
And I started like reading a bunch of those and like writing down like different tropes and elements that I wanted to work in.
Yeah.
And
so because I mean it really feels like that this world is hitting all. I don't really know the tropes myself, but it feels like you hit all of the tropes.
Well, I mean, I tried to get a lot of stuff. I was reading these books and like making notes of things I wanted to include. I wanted to have like there's a bit near the end of the book where a whole bunch of like different just villains from Gothic novels come in, and there's vampires and monks and Italians and everything. I definitely wanted the main villain to be a monk because like the monk is one of the classic Gothic novels, and there's a lot of ones that are like just about terrifying monks and priests and other like Catholic villains.
Yeah,
and I'm Catholic myself, so I love this stuff. So yeah, it was a lot of fun stuff that could be worked in. I probably could have worked in more. And then there's elements. My parents moved to England for 2 years around this time, and so we went to visit them, and I got to see things in England that I thought that I want to include. Like we went to old estates, and there were places that had hermitages. Okay, so they have like where they would put a little, like rich people would build like a little tiny house in the woods in their estate and like get a hermit to just go live there.
Yeah.
And so just so they could have like a random person living in their house and on their property.
Yeah.
And it was quaint, I guess. It's like having a garden gnome, but like full size, and it moves around. So I definitely wanted to have that. So there's like a little hermitage in Willowweep Manor, and eventually someone does live in there.
Yeah.
That was something I wanted to put in, and there were things like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. So Chris has the idea.
Yeah.
So he brings you in. So what does that mean? How does that work?
We like brainstormed the ideas for a while and things we wanted to include, and Chris did different sketches like
on email.
Over email. Yeah, okay. Like I've collaborated and I love collaborating, and I love collaborating like in every possible capacity. I think I've done like just about every possible combination of writing and drawing and co-writing and co-drawing. But this, we basically mostly just emailed back and forth. In fact, we realized we did not talk face to face for like this entire time. We did not see each other until we started doing these Zoom interviews after the book came out. And that's when we realized that we did not actually see each other at any point in the like 2 years or so that we were working on Willowweep Manor.
I don't think we talked on the phone, did we?
Yeah, no, I think we might have talked on the phone like once maybe. Yeah. And other than that, it was just all online. And we were, trading ideas back and forth. And Chris developed the character designs and started working on the house itself, Willowweep Manor. Just this amazing, like virtual construction he's done.
Yeah, and Chris actually mentioned that he could maybe show us what he.
Yeah, that is why is my share screen not doing it?
You've got to press the button somewhere there.
Yeah, application window. It's just not showing my other application. Oh, maybe because I'm in the full screen. It's
probably
on the full screen. We're experiencing technical difficulties. Share screen. Oh, there they are. SketchUp. There.
There it is.
Nice.
So yeah, it's the entire exterior and interior. And so basically any background I wanted, I just take a snapshot and use that as a reference.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. How long does something like that take you?
This took me about a month full time. I've been doing this kind of stuff for my comic strip Space Trawler for years, so I'm pretty familiar with it.
Uh-huh.
But it's going very slow. But you can see sort of there's the Great Hall, and there's the the living room and her bedroom up above it. So everything's really connected. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. That seems like a tremendous amount of work. I mean, obviously it has some payoff, but that seems like a
Well, I just find it makes the background feel really solid. Makes you feel like you're actually in the place. And also, like, once it's built, like, we're hoping we hope there might be a sequel. We've been talking about,
Oh, nice.
And if I already have it built, then that would be great. Except for Shaenon will probably have it take place in a different location.
That's right. I'm gonna have it in outer space.
Yeah.
So yeah, I need to get back to you about the notes for the sequel ideas.
Yeah. All right.
Did you have access to that, to the 3D model as well?
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't really use it. I was just writing what the characters did and then trusting Chris to figure out how that all worked. I mean,
Yeah.
I thumbnailed everything out, which I think you should always do when you're writing comics, just to get an idea of like whether this actually works on a page.
Sure.
So I did very loose thumbnails, but I didn't like require Chris to like stick to them or anything. It was mostly for my own reference.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. So let's back up half a step there. Are you, when you do the have you written a script when you're doing the thumbnails, or you do the thumbnails first and then write the script to see after you've seen how it works out on the page?
I do like a script outline and then thumbnails and then write the the final dialogue.
So would it be like and there's a fire truck that just pulled up outside. That's why we have flashing red lights on us. They're going to the coffee shop. That's not a fire, kids. So when you do sort of that plot, is it effectively like a Marvel style plot?
It is.
Then?
I'm like Marvel styling myself. Just like they used to do with like Stanley and Jack Kirby did, except I'm kind of doing it to myself. In fact, I'm like, I'm working on another graphic novel right now, and I've reached this point where I like have the plot outline, and I'll do like I'll thumbnail just a few pages at a time, and then write the dialogue out, and then do a few more pages, because I don't want to get too far ahead on the thumbnails and then find out that it doesn't really work when it's all written out. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what's working for me right now.
And then when you write the dialogue, you do it sort of movie script style.
Yeah, just like a screenplay. It's pretty loose. There's no like hard and fast rules to like how to write a comic book script.
No, there's not. That's why I love these kinds of process questions, because everybody's answer is different. I've interviewed, I don't know, I think we're at 300 cartoonists or something at this point, and nobody ever answers that question the same way twice. It's what I love about comics.
I've got like Nat Gertler's books on comic book script writing, which are great, but they're also kind of a showcase of how many different ways there are to write a comic book script.
Exactly. Particularly as a cartoonist, because I think it changes your both your workflow and your mental flow about how you think about comics and how you process, as opposed to people who just write. Christopher, she gives you thumbnails. Do you use them? How much do you use them? What do you do with that?
I utterly ignored them. First I did want to note that I didn't even start building the manor until I got the finished script, because I needed to know what rooms. I needed to know how, when they go from one room to another room, I had to make sure that there was a quick passage.
Sure.
But yeah, Shane and I sort of have a lot of similarities in our sense of humor, and so I thumbnailed the entire thing first, and after I would thumbnail like each page or each few panels, I would look at what she did, to see if I actually was, interpreted it correctly, and B, to see like if she did it funnier, I would
Right.
switch to that. But also just to at times it helped me just sort of it helped complement it. Like I'd say like, oh, I could see how I brought this joke up this way, and then I saw that she was doing it this way, and I sort of added the two together. And every now and then I would look at it because I was like, what the heck does she mean in this script? Like, I just don't understand. I look at the thumbnails and I go, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that. Let's talk maybe a little about kind of time and space in comics. And because it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, the book feels really, really constructed page by page. That like every page you're really trying to nail a joke on each and every page.
Yeah, I mean, I like it, not necessarily, but I do want to have like each page do something probably.
Yeah.
And it's nice to end on something that makes you want to turn the page.
Yeah. So how do you? I mean, does this come from doing, a web comic and strips? Does this? It's an interesting impulse.
It probably is a bit of a comic strip impulse, but like it's also just a need to get the timing right on jokes, because if I stretch it out on too many pages, it stops being funny. Or also, alternately, if I compress it too much, it stops being funny too. So, yeah, I mean, probably in one page, you can do a pretty good, well set up joke or exchange or whatever. But yeah, I guess also part of it is just not wanting to go too long without something funny or interesting happening.
Right. And do you? I mean, because like each page will typically have 5 panels on it.
About I don't want it to be too cramped.
Yeah, I mean, there's 7 or 8 maybe.
Yeah, that's what starts getting pretty. But those will usually be pretty small and panels where not too much is happening.
Right. Do you like so dealing with that time and space? I guess it's the I'm not a writer, so it's the trick. I don't really understand how the sausage is made.
A lot of it also probably comes from me reading a lot of manga, because there's a pretty low panel. There's usually a pretty low panel per page ratio in manga. There's a lot of big panels as opposed to lots of very small panels. Like the 9-panel grid is kind of the classic in American comics.
Sure.
And I like panels I generally like to do pages that breathe a lot more than that. So it just kind of worked out for me. Plus, I wanted to give room for Chris to draw stuff.
Yeah. Well, but this is interesting because you say manga because when I think of manga, I think of not very many panels necessarily, but they tend to be more breezy.
Yeah.
Right. Like I immediately think of things like Lone Wolf and Cub, where there can be a 5-page segment of just 2 people staring at each other as a leaf falls to the ground.
Yeah.
And you're just going whoop, 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 whoop through the pages. Whereas this is very dense to me.
I mean, it's a lot more dense in terms of dialogue. I like to have a little more breathing room than like manga does, but then I also we did have a lot of story to get through in like a 184-page graphic novel.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of plot. And I do tend to write a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
I do try to keep it not too much. Like, let me see this. Yeah. Like, there's some places where there's there's usually not too much dialogue per panel if I can help it, unless it's something where that's particularly what I want. Yeah, it's pretty good. That's pretty good. I like my own comic strip. Yeah, it's good. It's a good book. Like my own comic strips that I do online are very wordy, and they tend to take, like, the dialogue takes up a lot of space, and the art is not very, it's there to sell the joke, but it's not necessarily a super art and visual oriented thing. But like when I'm writing for somebody else, I want them to have I want to show off their art, and I want to kind of keep the dialogue to a minimum for me, which I admit is still more dialogue than you're going to get in like Lone Wolf and Cub. But if you look at my own comics, there's like tons of, it's like half, every panel is like half dialogue.
Sure.
This actually looks great, by the way. This comic's awesome.
It is really awesome. Christopher, how do you approach each page in terms of, sort of thinking about where the eyes gotta go and like what you need to do at the page turn?
Yeah, I mean, after years of doing this kind of stuff, it's very intuitive for me in a lot of ways. But since Shannon had largely broken it up into pages, I sort of, I had the goal. I mean, sometimes I'd split them differently for humor or pacing. But yeah, so I have the dialogue that I want to set up on the page, and then I think about the best way to put it in, and then I digitally lay out the panels first, and the panel sizes often are determined by how the text breaks, like simple things like that. So yeah, I'll noodle around with it. I tried to keep some variety of layout, so it didn't always just feel like the same layout from page to page. So yeah, a lot of it.
I don't give a lot of layout notes in my script because I think I really trust I trust Christopher in this case, but also usually I trust an artist in general to come up with interesting layouts and know how to tell the story visually.
Sure.
And I love that. I loved having the freedom to really lay it out and try to pace it.
Yeah, unless there's like a specific effect I want, I'm generally pretty loose about the layout descriptions.
Yeah. I mean, so you say intuitive, and I get that, but can I draw a little bit out of the intuitiveness? And my question is so my feeling is that comics are large, particularly cartoony comics, are largely a matter of reduction, of finding sort of the perfect image to illustrate the idea and to lead the reader to the next panel. It's about sort of finding and freezing a specific moment. Is that right to you too?
That sounds right to me. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you do it? How do you know what the right beat, the right emotion, the right expression, the right reaction?
Oh golly. Intuitiveness.
Okay, no, that's good. If you can't, I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, totally. No, it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of things. Some simple things like cinematography things, where a character who's moving forward and progressing in their story arc are moving from left to right, and that keeps the reader from moving to left to right. There's, I mean, a lot of it is. I mean, again, first I think about how I want to break out the panels. Like if I want to slow the action for a bit, I'll try to have a wide panel. There are certain tricks that you do to affect the pacing. So first of all, lay out the panels and get the text in there. And then after that, I really think about it as a cinematographer. And using this 3D model is something that I don't know that any other cartoonist does. So it's kind of nutto. But I look at the panel and I can see exactly the shot. I can see like, oh, do I want this in above shot? Oh, do I want this looking up? What angle would convey, this? And a lot of the time you just don't want the reader to stop and think about it. So it's a pretty traditional shot. And because that just keeps it moving along. As soon as you do like an above, like panned out shot, then that creates a pause. Like each angle and stuff creates a feeling. And so when I look at each panel, I kind of know where they are and what kind of angle I want, and then I snapshot the background and put it in as a reference. And so that's how I start off is I just have all the backgrounds put in and then I draw it on top of it.
It's interesting that you do the backgrounds first. I find that fascinating. I mean, I understand why that would be, but wow, that seems because I don't know, if it were me, I would try to construct each panel with the characters in it too.
That's what I do, yeah.
Right, like.
Well, it's sort of, I mean, it's in my head that the characters in their background, I can see them in the background.
Yeah.
It sort of creates two things. I mean, what I mentioned before about having these kinds of, this really good reference for a background makes everything feel solid. All the angles are correct. All the point perspective, but also a problem that often can happen in humor is you just get the talking heads.
Mm-hmm.
Like the shot of like me right here would be the panel. because that tells a joke and moves it along, and you get the facial expression, which is really important for the gag. But when I put in the backgrounds first, I have to think about their body in space. I have to really think about it much more visually as a scene, and I think that strengthens the work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, no, very much so. I almost feel like it could possibly take away spontaneity, but it's weird because this is cartooning, which is all spontaneity. I love the fact that you bridged this somehow. Your mind fascinates me, I have to say. No, and I mean this in a very sincere way. I'm not fooling around. Like I can see it now that you say it, but I would never have conceived of that. That's why I love talking to cartoonists. I really do.
I often have been really bad at figuring out what other cartoonists do, and so I can be very inventive because I'm utterly clueless. If that's an insight.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Now that I know that, I can see it now. Now that I know, I can look at the background and go, oh, I see how, and then I can see where you were like, oh, how do I get the figure into the space exactly right? It's interesting. Yeah. That's neat. Wow, that's cool. So yeah, and everything here is obviously 100% digital. Yeah.
Well, yes. Yep, it is. I mean, I draw everything with a Cintiq. Even I draw over the backgrounds because they're just these rough models. But yeah.
What kind of output do you have? Like a page a day, more, less?
Well, I mean, with my comic strip Space Trawler, I do 2 pages a week. God, how long did it take? Like 14, 15, 16 months full-time work. So I don't know. I guess that's about it. I don't know what's.
That would be a page every 3 days, roughly.
Yeah. Did that include coloring and lettering?
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, so there's that too. That
right. And well, one of those months was building the castle.
Yeah.
The manor. Yeah. And the lettering is that your handwriting? Is it a commercial font?
It's my handwriting. It's a font of my handwriting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Nice. I like it.
It's beautiful.
It is really beautiful. It does look really good.
I know. I've tried to make fonts of my handwriting and haven't come up with a good one yet, so I just hand letter stuff.
Yeah. I like hand lettering too, though.
I like it too. It's time consuming.
It is time consuming.
Yeah.
I like the organic nature of the balloon.
Well, that's the problem that I have, is that my artwork is very loose and my own artwork is very loose and cartoony. So if I have a font that looks artificial, it just is very jarring.
Sure.
So I'm still hand drawing and hand lettering everything.
Yeah. No, I like that though.
Yeah.
What's your output when you're going?
For my drawing or for my writing? For drawing,
like if you were doing a page of comics.
I have a daily comic strip, so I have to have a strip out a day.
Every day.
And I think
that's a strip.
And it's a 4-panel strip, and I think that's a pretty good unit of comics that you can draw in one day. And I draw them a week at a time. And I letter a week of panel. I mean, I draw a week of panels, and then do a week of pencils, and then a week of lettering, and a week of inks, like all at the same time. And that takes 2 or 3 days. So I draw a week of strips in about 3 days, maybe.
Wow.
I'm very fast.
Yeah.
I have to be, because I'm doing a daily comic strip and also writing graphic novels.
Sure.
I also have several day jobs.
Sure. The do strips pay? Is that economically a thing? No.
Well, I mean, sure, for some people. I mean, I just do mine online.
Yeah.
And I'm at the point where that's actually throughout most of my web comics career, it's been just about lucrative and rewarding enough to keep going.
Right.
Not enough to actually support me or anything, but enough that I'm this is probably worth continuing to do.
Right. But not to support yourself.
No, I have a day job also in comics.
Yeah.
I do a lot of everything I do is comics related. It's a little obsessive.
Yeah. Are you still working at Viz?
Yeah, I'm a freelance editor for Viz. I don't work in the office. I'm a freelancer, but I edit and rewrite manga for them.
Yeah.
And that's my primary job. And I've got some other gigs.
That's I'll get back to you in a minute, Christopher. I don't want to leave you in the lurch, but I want to follow up on the editor and translator part, because that's a really.
I'm not a translator. I can't speak Japanese.
No, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm woefully unqualified for this job.
But someone's giving you a translated thing, and then you're turning it into a good script. I don't want to say a good script.
A readable script, because it's a language that usually requires a lot of localization. It's a very specific language. It's a very different language from English.
Yes. So can you talk about some of the challenges of that? Maybe this fascinates me.
There's so many challenges. It depends on the manga. You know, I'm doing right now I'm rewriting 3 manga and editing 3, and they've all got their own particular challenges. One of the ones I've been doing for many years now is Case Closed, aka Detective Conan, which is a rare example of a very wordy, slow to read manga that actually has a ton of dialogue, which is actually a lot of fun, because it gives me a lot of challenge, a lot to work with when I'm rewriting and putting it together. I try really hard to get the characters' voices down for it. And then I also do the other 2 titles I edit are Hayate the Combat Butler and Fly Me to the Moon, which are by the same creator, and the creator is super nerdy. So to a degree, these are like otaku manga. They've got lots of nerdy in-jokes and stuff.
Sure.
Sometimes that's very hard to translate, because they're not always things that American readers would know anything about. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's anime or manga that people know about, or video games. But sometimes it's about Japanese radio podcast shows that are hosted by voice actors, and you have to know all these in-jokes about the voice actors to get. It's fun though.
So how do you approach that to make it readable for the Western audience?
It depends on the title. Since we don't do endnotes for these books, which is always a good idea. I actually always like it when manga have cultural notes at the end, so you don't have to clutter up the page with footnotes or anything. Hayate, I'll usually keep the reference, even if it's obscure, because it's for an audience of otaku, and I figure that readers are probably going to
do their own research. Yeah.
They can, although sometimes it's hard. And so I won't do too much unless it's something that you need to understand the plot to know what they're talking about. Fly Me to the Moon, I might be a little looser because it's less pop culture reference centric. This is a fairly new title, so I'm kind of still getting grips on this one. And then I rewrite Mao, which is the new Rumiko Takahashi manga, which is very exciting. And that's fun, but it's also a very easy sort of rewrite job, because it's very low dialogue, very high on action and visuals. I actually, for a while I edited Inuyasha. I was rewriting Inuyasha very briefly, and that was the easiest gig I ever had, because every page is just Inuyasha, Kagohome, Inuyasha, 4 exclamation points, Kagohome, 4 exclamation points. Oh, it's so great. You get the whole volume like that. And I did that, and Mao was really cool. So it's actually really fun. It's got a lot of historical stuff. Right. That's this girl. She goes back in time to about 1920s era Japan, which is actually a great time period that you don't always see in manga, but it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of interesting historical elements you can do in there. You can also have the characters talk in different slightly more formal registers depending on what period they're from. Yeah. So that's fun. There's always, there's lots of specific challenges in doing manga localization, and then I've got to put it all together into a package. For the ones I edit, I then have to put it together into a package. Yeah, it's a book.
And it seems to me that this is the kind of work that you do that you just don't really get any credit for, in a way, right? Because the creator's name.
Yes, and that's as it should be. The creator's doing all the work here. Well, ideally, we're enhancing and making it possible, which is a challenge. It's if you do a more literal translation, when you're translating something, you are not really translating the experience that the native speakers would get reading it, because they're not reading something that's very stiff and hard to understand. They're reading something that's natural.
Yes.
But it can be really hard to figure out how to translate this over. Yeah. And that's true in any translation of any language.
Yeah. I'm sure. I think that in comics, it's got to have some certain.
It's comics, and also also Japanese has a lot of particular quirks that are very different from English and things they'll translate. It's I just read a manga adaptation of the classic Japanese novel I Am a Cat. Yeah. Which is written around the turn of the century. It's from the point of view of a cat. It's a very much beloved manga. Yeah. I mean, novel. It's a very much beloved novel. It's a manga adaptation, but there's like, it's a hard translation job because a lot of it depends on the way people talk in this particular time period, and so you have to get the period thing right. And like the title does not translate well because like, the particular quirk of the book is that the cat talks in a very formal register that would have been like old-fashioned even when the book was written. So the title really translates to something more like "I doth be a cat," you know.
Okay.
And so it, you know, it's hard to translate. It's you know, I've gotten to be fascinated by translation from doing this for years. I'm reading like a collection of Jorge Luis Borges. I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing his name correctly. Short fictions, and like his first, like sort of his earliest sort of major story is he's writing in Spanish, which is actually very similar to English, so there shouldn't be a lot of translation problems. But like his first major story was called The Man on the Pink Corner. Okay, and it's about like Argentinian street toughs, you know, and like there's a long history of this story like being translated in English. It's just The Man on the Corner because people thought pink sounded too sissy. So, but that's like not a direct translation, and like so you have to. How can you get the feeling of what the story is, and also, you know, And the translation I read just translated as Man on Pink Corner, which is probably good. It sounds tough, but also pink.
And then just sort of one last question on.
Yeah, I'm sorry to go on so much.
No. I find it fascinating. That's why I'm letting you go on.
This is a joke. I mean, I've been doing manga. I've been working in manga for like 20 years. So this is something I've like been.
So, comics are a visual language. And manga and kanji are there characters or idioms that only exist in manga?
Do you mean like visual idioms or language idioms?
I mean like language idioms.
Tons.
Think.
Obviously, tons. Yeah.
Or even visual. Why? Which is there a better way to answer? Do you know the question I'm asking? Actually,
not really. There's just so much.
What I mean is so how lettering is a huge part of comics for some creators particularly. I think especially in terms of like sound effects, right? You know, the booms and things like that are across the page. So is there a difference in how you would transliterate the word boom in Japanese to what is presented in the comic as part of the art? That was how I asked that
that's flipping hard. That's freaking hard, and that's why most manga publishers now just keep the Japanese sound effects and just do a little note in Viz. Usually, I always replace it with the sound effects. Interestingly, the actual dialogue in the dialogue balloons, there's no interesting fonts in Japanese. They traditionally would just like type or print out dialogue in kanji and like paste it in, and now it's done digitally, but it's the same thing. So there aren't like it's actually really nice when you see a cool font in like English translation, but in Japanese it'll almost always be just like a typed font sort of thing. The sound effects can be very elaborate, and yes, they're not in first of all, they're not in kanji. They'll be in another alphabet. That's Japanese has like 3 different character sets, and there's one that they use for sound effects for things that are not Japanese words. And that could be hard to translate because there's a lot of sounds. The sound of silence is like a classic one that occurs in manga all the time, and we don't have anything like that. As far as fonts, and sometimes the fonts are very good. And one of the odd things, Japan can actually be pretty, like, for all of it, it's a very high tech country. Like it can be very slow to adopt new technology. So we're only just now getting to the point that manga or artists are using a lot of like digital drawing and inking and lettering. So it would actually be a super easy. It would be my job would be way easier if manga was assembled the way that American comics are now, like the way that mainstream American comics are nowadays, where like everything's on different layers and the sound effects are added digitally. In Japan, in manga, they're generally just drawn onto the page still, which means it's hard to remove.
Interesting.
It's fun, and like I don't always get to do as great lettering on the sound effects as I'd like. I mean, it's great when we can like stick to the look of the Japanese sound effects as much. I did like years ago. I did Knights of the Zodiac, aka Saint Seiya, which is like a classic action manga from the 80s, and that one has a very famous. The artist has a very famous in Japan way of drawing sound effects. You like, notice his sound effects like right away. So I was lucky enough that I had letterers on that one. I had a couple of very good letterers who like kept the whole look of the original sound effects, and
Nice.
I worked hard on that because it's kind of like if you're like a Japanese manga nerd, then you could do. I've seen like artists do like parodies of the effects lettering on Saint Seiya, and people know what that is.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things. Yeah, and doing sound effects. So there's 2 Japanese effects that I always keep the same just because I love them so much. And one of them is kapon, which is the sound of a hot spring. It's supposed to be the sound of a ladle like going into a bath or hot spring.
Okay.
And like anytime there's a scene in like a public bath or a hot spring, there'll be almost always be kapon as a sound effect. I always keep that one because I love it. I always keep kia for a scream. I love a kia scream. People are always I do in Detective Conan. People are constantly going kia when they see a dead body. I can't change a kia. I can't change it to eek or ya or something more American. I just I like the kia scream.
Hey, so Christopher.
Sorry, I talk too much about manga.
No. I like it. I wanna ask you about go back to the story where I started that original question was about web comics and you know the economy of doing comics on the web. You also regularly produce a strip. It's on the web, right? I'm correct about So how does that work for you economically? Is it
you know, the money I get from webcomics is definitely below poverty level, but I'm used to living below poverty level, so it's basically covers like the slimmest amount of my bills, and so I do freelance work as well, and that allows me to
day job, yeah. I always wonder because there was a time particularly because you were early in on the.
Oh yeah, Chris has even been on it even longer than I have.
Yeah, there was a minute it looked like webcomics were going to be like economically viable and that people could make money at it.
Well, I mean, sometimes they are, but you know what? It's hard to monetize anything on the internet.
Yeah.
Patreon has been a huge game changer.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, generally you need in my opinion, you need about 12,000 people to like reach the minimal amount of survival, and then 30,000 to actually make a living. And I'm definitely not at 12,000.
Yeah. It also seems to me, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that most of the people who do the best with webcomics are ones who do a lot of merch. Who have slogans and stuff that can get put on.
That's not so much the case anymore. And actually, it's one of the things that I think is that I think it is getting harder to monetize. It's a little bit difficult to monetize webcomics right now because we decided to replace the entire internet with like 3 websites that don't work very well.
Right.
So it's harder to direct people to a particular your website. So I'm seeing more like online cartoonists doing better by either going on social media like Instagram and stuff, or by sites like Webtoons, which does which is a go-to site for just like dozens and dozens of comics.
Sure, but correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that until you hit X number of hits, you don't get anything from Webtoons.
That is true.
Zero. You get
far as I know,
nothing.
As far as I know, yes, and I've not researched Webtoons very much.
Yeah, and it seems to me that that's more of a pyramid scam than a viable platform.
I'm not going to
get at the top can make a lot of money, but everybody else makes nothing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's most of the internet.
Well, yeah, it's a big problem. I don't know.
Nobody wants it's like the ongoing problem of the internet is that nobody wants to like pay for content.
Yes,
and it includes the people who run websites and services and stuff. But,
exactly.
Personally, I make most of the money from selling books and from Patreon.
Right.
I've like other merchandise like T-shirts or whatever has never done well for me, but people like the book collections, which is great, and the Patreon has been a real lifesaver.
Yeah.
As far as merchandise, it's sort of the opposite way around. That like the successful people have enough readership that they can actually make money on merch, and that's why.
There's that.
Yeah. I mean, I see it happening with music too. You know that there's all these musicians who can no longer make any money doing music. They can only make money by concert tickets or by T-shirts. Yeah. And but that's not why you're a musician. I don't. we've screwed it up. The internet screwed it all up. But we had books. So actually, let me bring it back to the book. What was your conception of what this was going to be while you guys were workshopping it? Did you think it was going to be a web strip? Did you know it was going to be a book?
Yeah, it was definitely going to be a book.
A graphic novel. Okay.
Yeah, we shopped it around for a good year or two. I don't remember how long on our own before we found an agent who was able to sell us. So yeah, it was a long haul.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. So you would say that like agents are necessary at this stage of the game?
I don't know, necessary, but extremely helpful.
Okay.
I mean, it's good. It's with the agents we have different agents now, but they're able to talk to book publishers, which is how this is published by MacLeod Books, which is a imprint of Simon and Schuster.
Right.
And I wouldn't have been able to approach Simon and Schuster unagented.
Right.
Most comics publishers, a lot of comics publishers you can approach without an agent. So that's totally doable. But book publishers you need an agent.
Right. Well, and then when you're doing all ages material, you kind of have to be in the book market. I mean,
it's a big market. It's a really good market for children's and YA and all ages graphic novels right now.
Yeah. Was this always were you guys intending it just as a story, or did you intend it as an all ages story?
It just I think it kind of just ended up that way, There just wasn't anything smutty in it, I guess. There was no ultra violence.
Yeah.
I don't know, Chris, how did you envision it?
Yeah, I mean, I originally wrote her sort of as a college age character, but once we started working together, it seemed it was sort of going towards the middle grade, but our editor asked us to to include sort of the high school level and add a little more romance to it. So.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. Because it is. It's probably one of the older books we picked for the kids club. But it's really only from vocabulary. It's not from plot or a middle reader is gonna love this. I think but there's a lot of vocabulary that they're going to be like, I don't know what that word means.
Yeah, that happens when you're writing like a gothic novel setting.
Yeah. I felt okay about it though. Like I don't feel bad about sending kids to a dictionary. I don't know. I think that's okay.
Well, my 7-year-old read it, so there's that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
He said it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he? Interesting. Okay. That's good, because you always hear about other entertainers, not comics people who like their kids just don't want to have anything to do with what mom
he
and
didn't
dad
seem
do.
super interested in it, but then he just finally sat down and read it like last week, and he got really into it, which is delightful. He was pointing out the parts that he thought were funny.
Nice.
And afterwards, he told me that it was a good book, so that's high praise.
I like the bunnies.
I'm pleased with the bunnies.
Yeah.
That was my thing. I think I made Chris very sad by making him draw all these bunnies.
Yeah. The shot is like, draw a shot from a balcony looking down below, and everywhere is covered in bunnies.
Yes.
So it's a joke among cartoonists working with writers, where the writer, like in one sentence, is like, show an epic battle scene.
Yes, it's great.
Yeah.
But that you can read the lettering on their watch.
Yeah. So, I love the idea, and I loved how it came out. The torture was worth it. But
the one of Nat Gertler's books on comic screenwriting has like one of Neil Gaiman's Miracle Man scripts, which they're incredibly detailed, because Neil Gaiman learned how to write scripts by looking at Alan Moore scripts, and Alan Moore scripts writes entire novels. But he had one page where Gaiman spends like 2 pages describing this entryway that is a room that's like a mile square, and there's at the far end is a single desk with like one person sitting at it, and like, how the hell are you supposed to draw this? And it's like he has all this detail explaining exactly what he wants to get, and like the artist gave up and just drew like a close-up of the desk, and I'm so pleased with that.
Awesome.
I'm so pleased when I finally saw the comic itself, because I'm like, oh yes, good work.
Writers.
Yes. But no, how do you draw a comic, like a room that's a mile square and there's
Sure.
one tiny desk and somehow you can tell what's at the desk?
Yeah, I don't think there's a way to do it to tell what's at the desk. I can picture something
Yeah.
there, but yeah.
No, you
Not
just
to
did a
tell-
close up of the desk. It's
Exactly.
great. Oh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm so proud of that artist.
Yeah. So yeah, you say it's from Schuster, and Margaret K. Elderberry is not exactly an imprint known for their comics material.
Yeah, they're doing some now. Like
They're doing some now. No,
they do. I guess they do children's and middle grade
Yeah.
and YA books,
Yeah.
and a lot of publishers who publish that material are looking into graphic novels right now.
Well, but this is my question to both of you.
Uh-huh.
Is there any challenge working with people who are used to working with pros and maybe who don't really fully understand the language of comics? And I'm not trying to throw any shade on anybody, right?
No shade. I know. I actually had a really easy time working with MacLeod. I'm actually working with them on I sold another script to them, which is in progress now. It's being drawn now, as far as I know, and in both cases, they seem to really understand the material, and the editor has had great feedback from me, which is great because it's not always easy to figure out from a script what something's going to look like. I don't know what kind of interactions Chris had, so you have to ask him on the art itself.
And I am doing so.
Yeah, no, it was great. Yeah, they had occasionally they'd have some feedback just about like clarity and things like that. But it was all good feedback. It was they were great to work with. I felt a little bad once I had done the pencils, and so everything was ready. I had a lot more feedback about the story than they did. Shane and these character arcs aren't really developed. We have to do this, and this, which I think is hard to tell until you have the whole thing drawn out and read it, feel how it goes. But yeah, no, they were great to work with. They're really really supportive.
Yeah, and okay. So and then there were parts about the book that you thought needed some tweaking. Did that involve redrawing? Did that just involve redialoguing? What was the give and take of the process there?
Mostly adding, my brain's blanking on the oldest brother.
Lawrence is the oldest brother.
Thank you. Yeah, Lawrence,
Montague, and Cuthbert.
Yeah,
I love that last name.
That's
Cuthbert.
Chris. Those are Chris's names.
Cuthbert, I love it.
Are they? Oh yeah.
I think they were. Cuthbert is definitely yours.
That's awesome. Lawrence, yeah, his story arc seemed to kind of not really draw a conclusion, and so SHAENON found a very clever way of adding some dialogue in the scene where they're in the brewery that sort of tied that all together, and yeah, just big, because I do a lot of writing as well, and so I think a lot about what, how it all holds together as a whole, and thus the arcs of each character, and it's the story would have totally flown, and no one would have thought twice about it if that wasn't added. But I'm happier because of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Was there anything you can think of that changed in the process?
No, I remember that. I remember adding more material with Lawrence to, maybe round him out a little bit. The funny thing that the brothers are kind of simple characters because they're archetypes.
Yeah.
But the story is partly about breaking out of different archetypes. So we had to find ways for them to do that at least a little bit. Yeah.
So maybe let's talk about Haley for a couple of minutes. Where is there an inspiration? Is there
Well, this was this started as Chris's idea about a woman falling into the world, and so she went through a lot of revisions in terms of how old she was and what kind of personality she had and her character design. I think Chris went through a lot of different designs for the character before we settled on it, and I wanted her to be like a sort of over enthusiastic nerd for a particular thing, because that's what I personally understand as an over enthusiastic nerd.
Sure.
And I like the idea of some of it, like a teenager who was just really into this sort of inappropriate literature, and it's way too much into it.
Yeah.
I wanted her to have a very upbeat personality, I think.
Yeah. Well, that she does. Yeah.
You see the image I put up?
Sorry? Yeah, there we go. This is like, those are Chris's like really earliest.
Okay.
Yeah, this was the one page I drew before I knew what I was doing. And yeah, she was just this college-age kid. She had just come from a dress-up ball for fun, which is why she was wearing a Gothic dress. But yeah, it was, it's the spark of the idea stayed in, but, you don't want to be stuck with where you started. That's not right.
Yeah. And so at what point did you decide to make her African American?
That was Chris's design, I think.
Yeah, after college, I drew health pamphlets. Those 16-page pamphlets that you find in doctor's offices? I did that for 2 years. And there was a company policy of the 25% policy, where 25% were white, Hispanic, Asian, African American, or Black. And it's I don't really do anything strict in that way like that, and those are obviously very generalization of all the races that are out there, but since then I've worked really hard to just make sure there's diversity in my comics, and so I thought really hard about the three brothers. Obviously, I mean, since it's sort of this English, they're from this novel tradition, so they had to be very white, and then
they have to be. There is no way that they can't be. Yeah.
And then the maid, she was is this opera singer, so Nordic in some way. I tried to do that, and I just love the idea of Haley being Black. I did a ton of research on different hairstyles and different things, and yeah.
No, I think it was a great choice. I like that choice a lot. I just it's it plays against the Gothic tropes, I guess, which is probably what makes it better and stronger. Is that she's not a traditional, pale, frail Gothic heroine.
No, she's very much a sort of contemporary character.
Yeah.
And we don't really the action takes place almost entirely in the Willowweep Manor universe. We don't really learn much about her background except that she's a teenager and she really likes Gothic novels for some insane reason.
Yeah. Like too much, right? There's only 3 pages at the beginning that talks about it at all, but
it ends up being useful. So it's it's all worth it.
Yeah. So if you do a sequel, will it continue to be Gothic? Is that?
We're kind of working that out right now. We're kind of tossing ideas around.
Yeah, I mean, people love the main characters. If there's a sequel, it's because they love the first book. So we'll want to include Haley and the brothers.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, unless Shannon has other plans.
Yeah. How about the name Willowweep?
That was Chris. That was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, we expanded, the publisher suggested the full title, The Dire Days of Willowweep Manor. They wanted a longer title, and we kind of played with ideas. And that's what we came up with.
Yeah, it is a really, really long title.
It is, but it could also be shortened to Willowweep Manor, so you can just keep it that way if you want.
It also starts with a the, which is as a bookseller, I hate books that start with the.
I'm sorry, why do you hate books that start with the?
Well, because our database, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't want things to sort in alphabetical order, because all the books that start with the all sort together, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Sorry.
Willowweep Manor,
we'll keep that in mind for the next book.
But I love Willowweep. I love it because it has 3 sets of 2 in it. The double L, the double W, and the double E, and there's just something about that.
I wish I had any recollection of how I came up with it. So I'll do a lot of research, and then once I make a decision, I'll forget. And also, my girlfriend Cedarwood is really into those novels as well, and so she definitely helped with a lot of ideas and names and things like that. So credit to her for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Jordan, was there a question or did I?
There was.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was having too much time looking at both the screens.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
the person. Oh, okay. Nelson Mitchell, what graphic novel archetype did you feel was the most important to the mood and plot of the novel?
I think probably mean gothic novel.
I think that
maybe,
meant
but
gothic. Yeah.
I don't know.
But
What do you?
Gothic romance novel archetype. See, that's the second version of the question.
Oh, I see. Oh, there we go. I don't know.
That's the better one. Good job, Nelson.
Chris, I guess Chris said he was most influenced by Jane Eyre. I was heavily influenced by Wuthering Heights. What do you think, Chris? What archetype? The brothers were important. Like we wrote down like different. I had a list of like the different Gothic hero archetype, like Gothic love interest archetypes, and how they're Lawrence is like the brooding Jane Eyre guy, and then like Montague is the passionate Wuthering Heights guy, and then Cuthbert's kind of an idiot.
Yeah,
he's the feckless heir. He's the feckless youngest heir. Yeah,
feckless is a great word.
Thank you. I don't know.
They're without feck.
Yes, I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I agree. The three brothers, of course, so romantic central, and I think adding the monk was brilliant. I mean, I think that really brought it together.
We drew different monks. The monk is very tall and thin, and like my thumbnails, and then Chris ended up drawing a really stumpy monk, a stumpy monk, a stump, a stunk.
I like the stunk.
He's a stunk. He kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I kept wondering, like, how could he loom? Like,
I know. I haven't looked at the script, and Chris is drawing this little terrifying boulder guy.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's great. It's way better.
No, it is great. It is great. Like I said, I loved this book so much.
Oh,
I mean,
good.
And Zoe and Kat can both agree that they were laughing at it and with it. And
I'm so glad.
And yeah, we were unanimous on this one. That this was the book to pick.
I'm so glad.
It's funny, good stuff. So let's wrap it up. There's two wrap-up questions. So let's do the first one first. What do you want to plug? Is there anything you want, particularly for the kids? Bear that in mind. But is there something that you're working on? They're coming up in the future that you would like to keep your eye out for?
Like I said, I have I've sold another script to Simon & Schuster and MacLeod, and I think I can reveal that it's called Steam, or at least it is right now.
Okay.
The script is written; it needs to be drawn, and then I have a couple more graphic novels I'm working on right now, but I can't say anything about them.
Nothing in the place to plug it yet.
Not at the moment.
Okay. Chris, you got something to plug?
For the kids, littld.net was a daily comic I did for years, an all ages one, and there's actually a graphic novel of it that I did for Penguin Dial Books, I don't know, 6-10 years ago or so. But other than that, I have a graphic novel that my agent is shopping around, and baldwinpage.com is where most of my work is, which I mean, there's no nudity or anything like that. There's swearing and adult ideas and such. So, but there's like all my strips since 1996 are portaled through there.
Nice.
That's impressive because you have been doing this since 1996.
That is impressive.
I know. Again, he's one of the few people who's been doing webcomics longer than me.
Yeah.
I got it in 2000.
Yeah.
And my website is SHAENON.com. It's just my name.com. The advantage of having a completely made up name is that I got the URL.
Is it a made up name?
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of Shannons.
No, I know, but
it's my parents attempting to anglicize an Irish name.
I see. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Very good. I thought for a second you meant you made it up.
No,
like a
my
nom de
parents.
guerre,
That would be so cool, but I'd pick something cooler, probably
it's pretty cool.
like Cuthbert.
How about the K though? I'm actually curious about the K.
Really, that's my middle name, and it's my mother's maiden name, Kelty.
But why not SHAENON Kelty rather than?
And then it gets too long. It won't
Then
fit
it
on the
gets too
cover. Look
long.
at this
Okay.
cover. It's
Okay.
already stretching across.
All right.
As it is, yeah.
I'm always curious about the decisions that people make.
There's no male Kelty heirs in the family, so
Okay.
the only way the name carries on is in middle names.
Yeah.
So my son's middle name is Kelty too.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
I like that.
Yep.
And then the final question is the what do you want to plug? Not you just did that. No, sorry, my brain. The final question is we have a lot of people who tune in who want to be cartoonists themselves, who want to draw, who want to do their thing,
Oh, those poor things.
who want to break in. Right. Well, and this actually, your answer might be really fascinating to me, just because you work in nothing but comics all the time,
that's true.
in many, many different ways. So, but to these poor people who want to do comics, which I think people should do comics. What's your advice? What do you say to them? What should they? It can be philosophical, it can be emotional, it can be a work thing, it can be process, it can be any gosh darn way you want to answer it.
I mean, you just draw comics or make comics, whatever you want to do with them. Kyle Baker had a really good book about how to draw comics called How to Draw Stupid, which I think is out of print right now, but if you look it up, it's pretty great. And he says, like, his number one advice is to tell people to draw comics, because he notices a lot of people say they want to draw comics, but then they haven't drawn a comic. So yeah, I mean, you just draw it.
You just draw it.
It's the advantage of comics, and admittedly there aren't many, is that there's a pretty low bar to entry. You can just draw something and like put it on the internet or self-publish it. If you want. It's not difficult. Like making money is difficult.
Yes.
Getting people to pay attention is difficult, but making comics is difficult. And I think if you are really interested in making comics, you'll make comics. It's not that hard.
And all you ultimately need is a pen and a paper.
Again, my kid makes comics, which is exciting. He staples papers together and makes a book, and then fills it with cartoons about cats, because he likes cats.
Nice.
Another good resource for learning how to draw comics is the Cat Kid Comic Club that Dav Pilkey just put out.
Agreed.
Which is actually like the one that my cat kid got for his birthday, and that actually has good advice about making comics, including I'm sure he's taught comics how to draw comics. I'm sure he's taught and talked about comics to kids for years, and this is how he knows this. But he explains that you can come up with an idea for a comic, like just writing down like a list of things that you like, and then you do a comic about them. And that's actually great advice. That is how I came up with the graphic novel the graphic novel that I'm writing right now, which I haven't sold or anything. It's about 3/4 of the way written. But I just wrote down 3 things. I made a list of like things I liked, and I picked 3 things. And the 3 things I liked were horror stories, cooking, and travel. And I think I picked travel because it was during quarantine, and I didn't want to travel, and I couldn't travel anywhere. So that's what this book is about.
Oh, okay.
And that's all I can say about it right now.
I thought for a second it was going to be a horror story about traveling and cooking.
It could be. No, it is. It's about all. It combines all 3 things.
Oh, does it? Okay, sweet. Awesome.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's all I can say, but it does. Yes, it combines all 3 things.
That's great. That's great. And I agree about Cat Kid too. I mean, it's it's funny. I said this is one of the oldest books that we picked for the club. That's probably the youngest book that we picked for the club. But it was just I just knew that the 13-year-olds would still get something useful from that.
It's actually pretty useful.
It's pretty useful. Yeah, I agree. Christopher, what's your piece of advice for the budding and aspiring?
For me, I was sort of turned off by comics for years because there wasn't a lot of comics that I liked. In the 80s and such, I wasn't really into superheroes that much. They're fine things, but I wanted to tell other stories. And I think a lot of people see what's out there and feel that they should draw or write comics similar to what's out there. I really believe in telling the story you're passionate about, telling your own story, and looking to other mediums, looking to novels, looking to movies, things that, comics were kind of stuck because of the Comics Code until the 80s or 90s. So they've only really flourished as far as different genres since then. So it's really new. So there's so much that hasn't been told. So tell your story. Tell the story you want to tell, and then eventually get pigeonholed into what's commercial and be stuck doing that for the rest of your life. So.
Yeah, the super ironic thing about how the Comics Code worked and it limited comics was that it was meant to ostensibly make them better for kids, right? but it's the loss of the Comix code, which ultimately led publishers to be able to publish a book like Willowweep Manor.
Mhm.
And I would say to you that you probably, there's no other medium that you could tell this story in other than comics in a way.
That should be true of every comic.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. But I think it's really true here, and I think that
good.
a gothic fantasy romp through time and space, or something, however, whatever we're gonna do it as. I mean, it works. It works. It's funny.
Good.
It's great. And for all you people who are watching at home, if you are looking for a book to read, you want to spend some time and read something good and funny. I mean, this is a strong recommendation. Love this book so much. Some housekeeping notes while we're here. Next month's Kids Club book is going to be Pax Samson. And so that'll be a pretty exciting. It's a superhero comic, but not with any superheroes that you've ever seen, and it's like a joy and a lot of fun. For our 2 adult clubs, we're talking to Wendy Pini, who does ElfQuest. Kids probably can't read this one, but it's a great book. That's coming up later this on Wednesday. That's that interview, and then 2 Sundays from now, we're talking to Dave McKean about Raptor. Also, probably not a kid's book, but it should be a good conversation. So if you're watching these, come back then, and we'll talk to you then. I want to thank SHAENON. I want to thank Christopher.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank you guys both for being here and being willing to talk about comics to me. I want to thank Jordan for running the show. I want to thank Zoe and Kat for being my awesome staff with which I could not do this otherwise. And I want to thank Robin for drawing comics in the background. You can hear him in the back of the interview while he was talking to them. So, but yes, thank you all. Thank everybody, and thank everybody for comics. And we will talk to you next time.
Wow.